Welcome back to another episode of the Zeg Talk podcast. It's been an exciting past week with a big win at home against Texas and some fun and exciting storylines developing as we enter into this new college basketball season. Mainly the WCC looking pretty good, the Pac-12 looking pretty bad, and the Big Ten looking even worse. So we're going to dig into our takeaways from the Texas game, as well as some of our other general takeaways and some of the big games that we were going to spotlight over this last week or so of the college basketball season. So let's get into it. All right, the Zags came away with an 86-74 win at home against Texas this last Saturday. Really, the score, the 12-point win was great, but it really wasn't that close for the majority of the game. Gonzaga went ahead by double digits at the 5:56 mark in the first half with a Drew Timme layup, and it did not get within single digits again from that point on. Texas made a little bit of a push, cut it to 10 or 11 in the second half, but that was as close as they got. So really just, from start to finish was a dominant win for the Zags. Obviously, Drew Timme came to play. He had 37 points, a career high. Looked like he had a chance to maybe catch Adam Morrison for the McCarthy Athletic Center scoring record, but kind of took his foot off the gas at the end. But it was a great game from Timme, great game from the Zags. Young guys, we'll talk about that a little bit, but for the most part, looked all right.
A lot of talk around obviously Timme being amazing in that game, shooting amazing from the field. He was 15 of 19 from the field, 7 of 9 from the free throw line, which is a happy trend for him and where he's looking better from the line this year. Couple, people saying, looking at Chet Holmgren's stat line, 23 minutes played, 5 rebounds, 2 blocks, 4 points. 5 rebounds, 2 blocks, 2 points. 4 fouls. And those 4 fouls didn't keep him out of the game for a super long amount of time. It wasn't like he was in foul trouble early and we had to rest him. I think he got maybe a little bit earlier than we would have liked. But truly if you're taking a quick look at the box score, you'd say, oh my God, what happened with Chet Holmgren? But I don't think it doesn't scare me. It doesn't scare me that, Chet's not going to be who we think he is. I think he is comfortable taking the back seat on this team. You've got guys like Bolton who had 16, Timme who obviously had 37, Nembhard had 9 and 8 assists. There were other scoring opportunities and other guys going off, and we didn't need Chet to step up and play some huge offensive role. And I don't think we're going to need to this year, period. There's going to be times where if other guys are cold, it'd be awesome to have him have a hot night, but I don't think he needs to be the offensive presence that some people think he's going to be. That being said, he does need to be the defensive presence. Something I saw on Twitter, Austin King was one of the ones who shared it. I forget where it came from, but talking about Texas attacking the basket and Chet Holmgren being a human deterrent of shots at the rim. When he was out of the game, Texas shot 33% at the rim, shots attempted were at the rim. When Holmgren was out, there was 60% at the rim. So a huge shift in offensive mentality for teams when you've got Chet Holmgren truly lurking on the baseline, just waiting to block your shot. So I think that was one of the biggest takeaways for me was I'm not worried about Chet Holmgren at all. He did what he needed to do in that game to get us a win, and he let Timme take the front seat, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up that. I think it was from Sam Viceni, if I'm pronouncing that right. There's been a lot of talk about Chet Holmgren, and I think people who maybe don't understand the game or didn't watch much of it just saw the stat line and were like, "Whoa, that's concerning." But yeah, so what you brought up, it piqued my interest. So I actually went through and on 2.5 times speed went through the first 3 games of the season and charted the shots attempted at rim. And I will say my numbers were a little bit different. I don't know what is the real number of feet away or how close a rim attempt is. So mine ended up being a little bit lower than Sam's. But in the first half of that Texas game, the rim rate, excluding transition attempts, so just breakaway layups, when Chet was on on the court in the first half, only 4.8% of Texas's shots, one of 21, were taken at the rim, compared to 28.6% while he was off the court, which still really low if you're looking at that compared to other games. And then second half, it went up more. And if you go back and watch the game, you'll notice that they had obviously went to the locker room, were like, hey, we're going to go at him, try to get him up in the air, which is another thing I'll talk about in a second. But pretty much my biggest takeaways from looking at this is not only are teams taking fewer shots at the rim when Chet's in the game, they're shooting a significantly lower percentage at the rim as well. So Dixie State, their shooting percentage at shots at the rim when Chet was on the court was 18.2%. Against Texas, it was 16.7%. And against Alcorn State was 33%. For when he was off the court for those three games, 20%, 57.1%, and 50%. So that just kind of goes to show you that even though he might not necessarily be getting a block on every possession or, scoring, filling the box score or the stat sheet up, like he's affecting the game in pretty significant ways. If you're forcing teams to either not shoot at the rim at all and be forced into 3-pointers and mid-range shots, or even middle of the key floaters, that's a win right there. And then the fact that they're only shooting when they do get to the rim at about 20% is pretty phenomenal. So he's fine. He, like you said, we don't rely on him to score. We're not going to need to rely on him to score. Maybe we should lower our expectations on what his average is going to be. I still think he's going to dominate and get his 15 to 20 points against some of the lower level teams that don't have big bodies, but he's going to be just fine. I don't think it affected his draft stock at all. If anything, it was better. Like, you're going to go to the guy who's getting the job done. And Timme was having a career night. They had nothing against him. They couldn't stop him at all. And Chet needs to go get his shots up because he's supposed to be a number one pick. I think if anything, that just shows that he's able to play within a system with other really good players and isn't going to disrupt that. So I thought he was just fine.
Well, let's talk about the inability to stop Timme in that Texas game, because Timme got shot after shot at the rim. Rarely was he doubled immediately. A couple of times he wasn't doubled at all, even when he got up over 20 points. I just think it was a wild defensive strategy for a defensive coach like Chris Beard to not come out and execute a defense that effectively takes away. I mean, I think going into that game, yeah, you can game plan for Chet Holmgren, and try to be like, Chet might be the number one scorer, but it's not like Timme came out of nowhere. Like, you still have to know the man has phenomenal footwork and is going to get inside and score baskets inside. I was confused. Personally, I was confused. I don't know if you saw something that I didn't, or if you've seen anything post game that was like, this is what they were trying to do and they didn't do it well. I don't know. Did you see anything that kind of gave what Texas might have been trying to do?
No, I mean, I was shocked, and I didn't even notice it until the second time I watched it. Really, I mean, I knew what I noticed when I watched it live, a few beers in, was they kept putting Brock Cunningham on Drew Timme in the post, who's not even at all a true big guy. He kind of seems to be maybe more of a Swiss Army knife, but 6'6", doesn't have a ton of size or anything. And they weren't really sending a double at all. And it was just he's going to score every time. It's going to be a score or a foul or a dump off to somebody else. So that was confusing to me. When they finally did start bringing a double team, it happened more often in the second half. A lot of times, they mentioned it on the broadcast too, it was late or it wasn't necessarily in the right spot. And then the recovery from the backside help wasn't coming either. And I don't know if that's just them still getting used to it or what. I mean, I think that it's almost unfortunate because now I don't know if we're going to see another team in one of the big games not double him immediately from the start. But also, I think Drew Timme's capable of scoring. I mean, he scored against Texas's doubles all the time, but it has to be an instant trap or an instant double, and you have to sell out on it, because if you don't, he's gonna dominate you. He's gonna score 30 points plus. So I would expect to see that more now. I really don't know what it is. I know I saw a couple of people, I think it was Stephen Carr, had tweeted out some videos, and that maybe Chris Beard had said, they didn't expect Gonzaga to enter it to the post from the top of the key as much. They were expecting, post entries from the wing. And I think that's something that our personnel this year allows us to do. One, because you have a phenomenal pick and roll player in Andrew Nemhard, who's able to get those angles and just in general as a passer, be able to enter it from different angles that, not every guard is going to be able to do. And then also having Chet at the high post, you can get it to the side, get it to him at the high post. And that's a high low that we know Mark Few loves, but that we haven't necessarily had the people to do it. And we have Chet there at 7'2" with a 7'6" or whatever it is wingspan. Like, that's a pretty easy dump down, especially against a smaller team. So I just don't think that they were ready for it. And I don't think they were equipped to deal. I mean, if there's a smaller team this year against our front court, it's going to be a long night, I think.
Yeah, I think it is unfortunate. Like, Texas is a really good team. This isn't meant to discredit the fact that they were fifth in the nation going into this game. They're still probably going to be a top 10 team. They're small. They're not equipped, period, to guard a team that's made up of guys like ours. Like, I think that's just a reality of that matchup. Now, if we see them again in the tournament, I don't think it's that much of not a game. I didn't really phrase that right, but I think it's a much better game. I think there are a lot of guys coming from a lot of different parts of the country, literally different teams last year, all coming into Texas. They showed us a graphic during the game of the recruit rankings or the transfer rankings for the guys on Texas this year. And I want to say it was like 1, 2, 4, and then 2 more in the top 30 or something like that. Like, it was a pretty dang good spread of guys all coming in, and they probably just haven't had a chance to gel. And maybe that's some of that, like, not doubling in the right place, not doubling at the right time. I think some of that'll come for Texas. So I don't expect this game to be as much of a non-contest as it was if we were to play them again.
Yeah, I think that's true. And one thing that Fran Fraschilla was pointing out during the game was that there seemed to be almost a little bit too much hesitation on their part, like, that you wouldn't expect from guys like that, what they have. And I think that's just still, they all want to be a team and play together as a team and not try to be too selfish and almost to a fault at this point where it's like, okay, well, you probably should have taken that shot. I think a couple of the shot clock violations were, we had good defense, but was also part of that where they probably could have had a shot and they just weren't taking them. So I'm sure as kind of the pecking order gets settled there offensively, that'll be better. But also, like, they didn't shoot that well from three, especially not in the first half. And that's partly the defense and not allowing them to get inside out. But for a team like them to beat us and to stay really competitive with us, they're going to have to shoot the lights out. Their guards are really going to have to dominate that matchup because, the bigs aren't going to. So, but speaking of recruiting or transfer rankings, maybe we should move to how wrong some of those were on Rozier Bolton, because he has been phenomenal to start the year. This was obviously his biggest game, given the circumstances, but he's shooting, I believe, 67% from three over the first 3 games. He's on fire here, obviously hit the half court shot, banked it in, but he was just great. The speed and the athleticism that he has, but the control that he has with that is huge, and something that I think we haven't necessarily seen. You won't see it a lot with the young guys. You won't see it with some of the transfers, just his confidence playing at this high of a level with this other, like with these talented of players as well, coming from the Big 12 and that experience there. And also his time at Penn State. I think he's just well equipped for that, and he's fit in really nicely. And his shooting's been huge for us because, we haven't shot the ball great, especially in the first 2 games and the exhibition games from 3 outside of him. So he gave us a huge spark. He was a stud that whole entire game. And I think I saw Caldwell tweet out, he was like, yep, they were just really wrong on that. I couldn't believe that they weren't higher on him.
We talked about at the beginning of this, our preseason preview. I don't even know if it was of Rozier or just talking about going into this season, but the dude was relied on to do everything at Iowa State last year. And when you go from that to being able to be a main piece, but not the number one scorer every game, I think it allows him, and playing off ball has just allowed him to thrive. Like, he just got in a system that fits for him. And I think he's also surrounded by guys that fit with him as well. I mean, I think that's a Gonzaga trend, right? Like, these guys are brothers. It's a Zag family. And I think that's just, there's so much to be said about guys that come in and grad transfer here, about the poise that they bring while also meshing with the youth of a team like Gonzaga to be able to take them to the next level. We've seen it time and time again with guys like Jordan Matthews, with guys like Gino Crandall, with guys like Bolton, who have just come in and thrived in the role of like being this off guard, older veteran presence on the team. I think few really looks for that, especially from some of these guards that play on the outside, to play off our like stud point guards.
It's kind of interesting as you're going through the names of some of our higher profile transfers that we've had come in, especially, grad transfer type guys. I think the ones that go into the starting lineup have been better from that perspective in terms of offensively coming in. And I think that goes back to when we had Gino on and we're talking to him about how difficult that, change of roles coming into a new team and now a better team where everybody's good. And coming off the bench is like a whole new role with that, where you don't really want to be taking the volume of shots that you're taking in other places. I kind of feel like the guys like Ryan Woolridge, and now obviously this year with Rozier and Jordan Matthews, those kind of guys who were able to come in, they were part of the starting lineup. They had more freedom to, really hunt their own shots. They've come in, and that's less of a, getting used to, like, it takes less time for them to get used to that new role. And like we saw Gino a few times where it was like, you knew he could score, but sometimes it felt like he was trying to rein it in too much because like that wasn't his role on that team. And so I think having him in the starting lineup is a great spot for him because, they've kind of given him that green light, like, hey, yeah, you're as much of the offense as anybody else is. And I'm glad that's been established through, our first big game there where he was really able to step up.
I want to say one thing in the news of transfers. Major shout out to Aaron Cook for thriving over at Georgia. The dude's been going off this year for them. I think he's leading them in scoring and minutes. So major shout out to Aaron Cook going off at Georgia. But back to the Zags and the Rozier thing. I think this team is very similar to last year's team, and I guess a lot of the Gonzaga teams recently, where it's a pick your poison night. Like, you got to kind of just pick and choose. Last game, it was Timme and Rozier, or Texas, it was Timme and Rozier. Another game, it's going to be Chet. Another game, maybe Nembhard's going to have a 15, 20-point game. He's been shooting the ball a little bit better the last couple of games. Like, Strother with 18 against Alcorn State sets his own, personal best. Like, it's very reminiscent of last year's team where it's like you shut down Kispert, you shut down Timme, all of a sudden Joel has a crazy night. Like, that's just how this team is going to work this year. And I think how a lot of Gonzaga teams are going to work going forward. And it's a product of having a very talented 7-man rotation. I think that comes naturally with something like that, but Gonzaga's just made it work so well, where every guy is willing to have those nights and willing to delegate on other nights.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of Andrew Nembhard too, got to touch on him because we kind of talked about going into this game where not that he'd struggled, but that he just didn't seem like he had really hit his stride yet. And he was phenomenal this whole entire game. Obviously, like, his defense, just watching the first 3 games of the year, has been great. It's not anything that's necessarily causing a ton of turnovers or anything, but if you watch him, he's getting into guys, he's making them uncomfortable. But then offensively, what we were waiting for was just that confidence in the pick and roll game, and he was able to really get into that and create a lot of opportunities. And like we touched on earlier, get the ball into Timme early on and at creative angles, and then he was also able to knock down his own shot when he needed to. I love when he gets, a little bit of a head of steam coming off the pick and roll, gets downhill and loves that little 15-foot pull-up jump shot when they sag off too much towards Timme. And yeah, he had a great game, just exactly what you needed out of him, nothing more. He wasn't trying to do too much, and So I was really impressed with his game. I'm glad he got a bounce back game.
9 points. I mean, he's back to his Andrew Nembhard-Wade's 9 points, 8 assists, and 1 turnover. So great assist to turnover ratio there. I think I saw that Few said after this game that he would have had 15 assists if Timme wouldn't have kept dribbling the ball a bunch every time he caught it in the post, because he takes those crab dribbles and he waits and then he pumps one way and he goes back the other way. His footwork's amazing. He takes a lot of time and getting baskets, like nobody's going to complain about that. But I thought that was a super funny comment by Few that Nembhard would have definitely had a lot more assists that game had not Timme not taken a couple extra dribbles a couple of those times. If Texas had been doubling sooner in the game, Timme might have been going up a little quicker with some of his shots, and Nembhard would have gotten some more assists. But it is what it is.
Anton Watson, also a solid game, 10 points, 5 rebounds, and an assist. And then obviously defensively, I don't think it really showed up on the stat sheet, but solid as always on the defensive end. But maybe to transition into the Alcorn State game, for 3 guys that we saw struggle a little bit, with Julian Strother, played 25 minutes. He was 1 of 5 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3, finished with 5 points, 3 rebounds. And then Nolan Hickman, actually, he played a pretty solid game, I thought. 19 minutes. He actually, in place of Strother in the second half, got a lot of those minutes later in the game. And I think that just kind of shows his poise for his age, where he's a pretty solid, like, you're not going to worry about him, having a defensive lapse necessarily, or turning the ball over a lot, taking an ill-advised shot. And so I think they felt comfortable with him. And that's good to see that you have another guard off the bench that they're already comfortable with this early in the season, especially as a freshman. And then Hunter Salas, he came in for 4 minutes total. I think it was only like a minute or 2 in the first half, got in at the end maybe, or was it all 4 minutes? I don't know, but he was 0 of 2, 0 of 1 from 3, and no points, no rebounds, no assists. He came in. He didn't look terrible, but he looked a little bit out of control, a little bit out of place defensively, maybe just a little bit too sped up. I think his 3, if I'm remembering it from this game correctly, was kind of just like I don't know what to do with the ball, so I'm going to shoot it, and it got tipped. So some of the young stuff there. And I think, we've been talking about when we were watching the UCLA Villanova game with Peyton Watson, who's obviously going to be a part of that rotation by the time we get to the end of the year. And he barely played in that game. And I think it's just a matter of, getting these guys up to speed, get used to to the competition level. And we talked about that coming into the season with him, coming from Nebraska. I learned during this game that he's the first 5-star from Nebraska ever. The competition level that he's used to playing against isn't quite there. And I think he's going to be pretty quick to jump to that level. And, we saw a little bit of that in the Alcorn State game, obviously not a top 5 matchup, but I think these next 2 games for both him and Julian Strother, these next 2 big games, against Duke and UCLA, are going to be a really big, tell for especially Strother, because he has a little more experience. He's second year. He's done great against some of these lower level teams in terms of his scoring. But, if he's having another 3-point, 5-point game against these big, legitimate opponents, that would maybe concern me a little bit. But and then hopefully Salas, can get some more run, get some minutes and make something out of it to where he's actually, part of the rotation for the second half as well. But maybe do you want to touch on moving into the Alcorn State game and how those guys rebounded a little bit?
Yeah, Strother definitely rebounded. Puts up a career high 18, goes 3 of 4 from 3, 7 of 9 from the field, finishes with 18, 3 and 2. Great game from him. I mean, all around great game. He went off early too, so another one of those games where he comes out hot. Just a solid game from him. Great bounce back game. A lot of confidence for a guy like that. Flipping over to the bench guard. Well, starting minutes. Timme only played 19. Bolton played 18 and Nembhard played 22, which meant a lot of minutes for bench guys. The 2 biggest names on that list being Hickman, who we probably expect at this point. Although he didn't have a great game, he didn't have a bad game. I mean, he only had 4 points. He shot 2 of 5, 0 of 3 from 3, which isn't amazing. But he did have 4 assists, 3 rebounds, and a steal. So generally speaking, pretty good game for him. Hunter Salas with the bounce back game for sure, though, finishes with in 25 minutes, 6 of 9 from the field, 16 points, knocks down 4 or 5 free throws as well, and adds 2 rebounds. So a complete bounce back game for Hunter Salas. He looked a lot better, a lot more confident. I think probably got a little bit of a kick in the butt for only playing 4 minutes at Texas, and then really bounced back and took advantage of an Alcorn State team to show what he really has on display in a D1 game. So those were the big bounce back games from the guys from the Texas game. What about the rest of the team and how they looked?
Yeah, I mean, just one note on Salas too. I think it's just great showing, who he is as a player and as a young kid coming into the program to be able to bounce back from that and not let it shake your confidence at all. So I think that was great to see him get back out there and have a game like that right away. You kind of touched on it with the main guys not playing as much, and I think that was a very deliberate from the coaching staff, because one thing we didn't mention was that Andrew Nembhard played every single minute of the Texas game, played 40 minutes. Drew Timme played, I think, 38. So, yeah, and those guys were in there a lot, and Bolton must have been up there as well. But, yeah, so you see Bolton, Nembhard, Timme, and even Anton Watson only with 13 minutes here, which is lower than his usual amount. So getting some rest. It was a relatively short turnaround, 1 day rest in between the games. And then obviously, quite a few games coming up here going into Thanksgiving week with, the game Friday and then Monday, Tuesday leading into the Duke game. So other than that, I think the last 2 games in general, our 3-point shooting's been better. We were shooting 50% at the half, I believe, for the Alcorn State game, finished at 37%. We were talking before this that, 2 of those, one was a Will Graves 3 at the very end, and Ben Gregg with a minute or so left trying to get some tacos. I think it was actually right when the taco chant started, he was like, yep, I'm letting it go. But you take those out, it's a little bit better. But I mean, even if this team's shooting 36.8%, that's what last year's team shot from 3 on the season. Like, that's phenomenal for us. If we're shooting 36, 37% with this team, we're perfectly fine. And you saw it against Texas as well, that they still had to respect the guys at the 3-point line where they weren't being able to sag off of them. So I think those were pretty much the main takeaways that I had.
Perry had 5 fouls in 5 minutes, I think, is one of the other ones.
Perry lost this matchup in the Gregg Perry debate. Ben Gregg, that's another one. He looked pretty good. His positioning and getting steals early was impressive. That looked pretty solid. So it's great to see some of those younger guys get some good minutes and some good plays in. Obviously, it's going to be a learning experience for Perry in this game, and I think the ref kind of had it out for him too. He had the early double foul that seemed a little iffy. It looked like the ref was just watching it, waiting to happen, and then he kept getting caught on an early post up, like he was hooking or moving him too much. That seemed a little ticky tacky, but it is what it is. He'll learn from it, and I don't think it's going to be a huge deal for him.
The only other guy I want to call out, and I think he got a little bit more runs than he probably normally would. He's been around for a while. We don't hear his name very often, but with Perry picking up 5 fouls in 5 minutes, Arlauskis got a little bit more of a run, got 6 minutes. I know it's limited, playing time. But the dude had 4 rebounds, and I think, can't remember who called it out. It was either somebody from the spokesman or maybe Will Maupin pointed out that on one possession, he went up for a block, got it, and then hustled after the block shot for the rebound himself and got on the floor for it. So I love seeing guys come in that don't get a lot of minutes and throwing that effort in, even in a game that's over, to be able to prove themselves, to maybe garner a minute here or there. I think that's awesome to see that even when even when our back of the rotation guys get into foul trouble, we still have guys that can step up and give it their all and be ready to play at the Gonzaga level. So I thought that was kind of cool too.
Party Marty, True Zag through and through.
Marty.
All right, well, maybe moving on into some of the other highlights from the college basketball world over the last week or so. I'm going to start with my favorite because it makes me really happy. Brought some real joy to my heart was seeing Michigan losing at home to Seton Hall after blowing a double-digit second-half lead yesterday. That was pretty great. And just the Big Ten in general really struggling. Going into today, which is Wednesday, they did not have a single win against a power conference team until today. I think Butler lost to Michigan State, and Butler is flaming hot garbage this year. But so not saying a lot, but we also got another ranked team losing at home to an unranked team. Maryland lost to George Mason at home. The whole entire Big East, Gavitt games, Big East, Big Ten challenge kind of games have been a disaster for the Big Ten. Illinois lost at Marquette after Curbelo just lost his shit at the end of the game. You also had Nebraska. Nebraska's 1-2. They're terrible, but they lost to Creighton. Penn State lost to somebody that was not very good. Wisconsin's off to a 2-1 start. Ohio State, they're 3-0, but they should have almost lost to Akron. So that was pretty bad. I mean, it's a rough start for them so far. I mean, the teams at the top have been not very good. And I just loved the Michigan game was so fun to watch because their fans were losing it as this lead was slipping away. They were complaining about every single call that was being made. And then afterwards, like on Twitter, it was just so funny. And you had, people like, I think it was Goodman, who, when they were, in a pretty tight game against Buffalo in their first game of the year, and like the first 10 minutes was like, Michigan national championship, book it. And you had other people saying like, I think they're the best team in the country. And it's like, they beat Buffalo by 12. It's like, it's a decent Buffalo team, but that's not like anything to go like, oh, yep, that's the one. And then they go and lose to Seton Hall, who, good, but you shouldn't be losing as a number 4 team at home in a game like that where you had such a big lead. Shot 20% from 3, 40% from the field, just terrible offensively. So that was great. And then another one, do you want to touch on this one? That was a fun one last night.
Swinging over to another power conference, or maybe this year not a power conference, depending on who you're talking about in the Pac-12. But Oregon, number 12 ranked Oregon, taking on BYU, not at home, but in Portland at the Moda Center, gets spanked by 32 points, 32, 81 to 49. I almost thought it was 20. It was 81 to 49. Not a close game. Barcello looked awesome. The whole BYU team looked phenomenal. And not to just credit how well they played, the Oregon defense also looked like hot garbage. Could not stop anybody on the BYU team. Complete runaway, was never close. Domination beginning to end. And an embarrassing loss. I almost think Michigan choking it sucks and is a bad look for Michigan. I think the Oregon loss is worse for Oregon. Like BYU
absolutely
is still probably a better team than Seton Hall. That's not even what I'm saying, but just an embarrassment for Oregon.
Yeah, it was like the first time since I think it was 93 that a top 15 team has lost in a non-home game, or non-home game, or maybe that's switched. An unranked team in a non-home game has beaten a top 15 team by 30 plus points since like UConn did it in 93. And it was absurd. They beat the crap out of them for the full 40 minutes. I saw something that said Barcello is in his last like 40 games, I think it was, he's shooting like 51% from 3. Like, dude's been crazy. And they did have a decent group of fans there, like BYU fans seem to be everywhere around the world. But yeah, I mean, before the game, you could see in the crowd at the Moda Center, it was definitely pro Oregon, but it got pretty quiet pretty fast. And I mean, that brings up another point. The Pac-12, like we knew going into this game that the bottom of the conference was going to be pretty rough. Like you have Cal, you have
UW.
Washington. UW is 2-1, but they've like won against sub 300 KenPom teams by a combined like 15 points. They should have lost one of them.
They lost.
No,
to
and
NIU.
they did lose one. Yeah,
they lost to NIU. They almost lost to Northern Arizona. I think they ended up pulling away and winning by 7, 8, 9 points, but the game was very, very close. I was at that game. I was on the inside rooting for NIU to win that game, and not just because I had money on them. And then they almost lost to Texas Southern the other day. I think they pulled away right at the end, but it was a very, very close game. Yeah, it was a 2-point game for a long time.
They've won. They beat Northern Arizona and Texas Southern by a combined 18 points and lost by 7 to Northern Illinois. So, I mean, they're really, really bad. I don't know how Hopkins is going to keep his job after this year.
If he even makes it the whole year, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, they're about to have their football and basketball coach gone midway through the seasons. Because, I mean, coming up, they're favored by 3.5 against Wyoming on Thursday, tomorrow. Then they play George Mason, who just knocked off Maryland.
Yeah, they're losing that game for sure.
South Dakota State, who's like top 100 in KenPom. Like, I think they might even be top 60 or something. Like, they're a pretty solid mid-major team. Then they play Nevada, which, great transition point because I know the WCC has been getting a lot of talk. We've been doing great and we have the highest rating that we've ever had for the conference rating, which is a really, really weird rating that, so we're ranked 7th for clarity there, but the rating itself, which is the adjusted efficiency margin of a team that is expected to go 500 in conference play.
Couldn't tell you what that means.
It's really confusing, especially in a season like this. Like if you go back and look at past seasons and you find a team that's like last year we had a team that was 6-7 and a team that was 7-6, and you take the average of their 2 adjusted EMs, it's like close, but not exactly. And so now it's like, you're playing in probabilities, and obviously it's going to change as teams get better, get worse, but pretty much it's saying what we have a decent depth in our league and that the top's still pretty good. And that's the highest. So it's like 9 something. We're like 3 points behind the ACC. We're closer to the ACC than the ACC is to the Big 12. And so, I mean, looking really good. I will say, I think there's going to be, obviously, as we get more stats in there, like it's going to look a little different. I think it might revert to the mean a little bit more. I still think we're probably the 7th best conference in the country this year, maybe really close with the American. But we're hanging our hats for some of these teams on beating Nevada. And are we sure that Nevada's just not very good? Because
fair.
They're about to lose like 3 straight games to WCC teams because they now play San Francisco, who is definitely like a quality team. But yeah, I'm not sure that that we should get too excited about those wins against Nevada, because I think that they might just not be very good this year after, the expectation was that they would be pretty good. But overall, West Coast Conference in general, BYU is now with the number 20 in KenPom. They made a huge jump.
They knocked off SDSU before they knocked off Oregon. So two great wins.
Yeah, 2 really good wins. Obviously, the Oregon one is insane, and probably, same with us in Texas. Like, they play again, probably not going to happen. Although that's where the Pac-12 starts getting worried, is if Oregon really is like doesn't put it together with the new guys that they have and are in a top 25 team. Like, you're looking at UCLA really good at the top, and then
Arizona,
USC, and Arizona. Yeah. Arizona has an outside chance of getting ranked. They'll be a tournament team, but like other than that, they're really bad. Santa Clara beat the crap out of Stanford. I don't think Colorado's very good this year, but yeah, it's going to be rough. I'm looking at WCC right now, though. St. Mary's, I'm a little concerned about.
I was going to say, I
might be ringing the alarm on them.
I think it's obviously Gonzaga 1, BYU 2. San Francisco's looked great so far this season. They knocked off Davidson the other day. Their veteran transfers that they've brought in this season have looked really well and have seemed to gel so far. So I think those three teams are going to be great. And the middle of the conference, I would say maybe the middle of conference won't end amazing, but they have definitely overperformed so far. And I love to see it for the middle of the conference, including San Diego, who I don't think we thought would be a middle of the conference team, has looked pretty good so far.
See, San Diego's my example of they beat Nevada, I think pretty badly too. They beat them, but then they also turned around and lost to Cal.
Yep.
So that's like, Cal's not good. But that's also part of, I think San Diego is going to be pretty up and down this year. They're up 10 right now against UC Riverside. LMU, got back on track. They beat Little Rock by 19 today. But St. Mary's, they just went on a little run. But when I first checked, they were up by 3 against Bellarmine with 2 minutes left in the second half. They're now up 8. And then Pepperdine is hot garbage. They're up 3 against UC Davis. They're really bad.
So we talked about WCC. We've talked about some of these marquee matchups the last couple of days, or upsets those last couple of days. Let's talk a little bit about some games that are coming between the UCLA and Duke game. We're going to release this episode over the next couple of days, hopefully by Friday. So you'll be listening to us Friday over the weekend, talking about last weekend's games and Alcorn State and some of these great games. We'll put out an episode on Monday that'll highlight both the UCLA and the Duke matchups that come next Tuesday and Friday. Let's talk just a tiny bit, since you just mentioned the team, Bellarmine on Friday, the no-pass offense. Pretty crazy. Do you want to explain it? Because I don't think that I really can.
I don't know if words are going to explain it very well. I would suggest that anybody who's interested go watch Jordan Sperber's breakdown of it. It was like the first one he did this year. Bellarmine's a new D1 school. I think last year was their first year. Not 100% sure what conference they're in. Let's see. Oh, the ASUN, the Atlantic Sun. They were a bit of a surprise last year. They ended up being second in the league, but they were like number 3 in the country, or number 4 in the country in like offense. I don't know what the rating metric that they were using in there, but they were good. And they were, I think it was maybe 2-point field goal percentage or something, but they're not athletic. They get a lot of good white guys. It's pretty much what they're doing. And their coach knows it too. Like, he's like, we're not recruiting with these powerhouses. Like, he's like, obviously Gonzaga is really good and they run a completely different offense than us and they have the athletes to do it. He's like, we don't get those guys. So like, we're going to run something else to make us competitive. And it's worked. They won a Division II, or maybe it was an NAIA Division I national championship. I think they were Division II though. I think they won a couple and were solid last year. And it's so weird. It's a lot of cutting and off-ball motion, and they literally don't dribble the ball unless they like absolutely need to for an angle, or they have a wide open lane off of a pass to get to the hoop. And they don't use ball screens. They have like one of the lowest ball screen rates in the country, because like that's not part of their offense at all. They compared they have marginal, like a very small amount more dribbles than they do passes per game, which if you looked at any other team that's playing basketball in college basketball, like that's insane. So it's going to be a really unique offense. Like I said, they were just in a 3-point game with 2 minutes left against St. Mary's. So they have the capability of playing well, but I think when they play against teams with really good athletes, it's just really tough for them to compete with them. They're 0-2 on the season, about to go to 0-3 after the St. Mary's game becomes final. But it'll be an interesting one. It'll be a good test, I guess, for our defense, especially communication wise, because there's a lot of actions coming off of it. You got to stay on your toes. But yeah, I don't know.
It could make a game that's not going to be close a little bit more fun to watch, but because you'll get to watch an offense that's predicated on something that you don't see very often.
The funny thing is, this could be a game where you could get both team names pronounced terribly wrong, because I've already heard Bellarmine a lot, which, I went to Bellarmine High School.
Yeah, because there's a Bellarmine, I feel like, in every state.
Well, so there's Bellarmine in Tacoma and Bellarmine in San Jose. And then we used to always like get confused. Like we'd Google or go to the wrong site and we'd get this Bellarmine. But like, I mean, you have people all the time like Bellarmine, Bellarmine. And I heard one of the college guys announcing it. And then you're going to have somebody say Gonzaga or something. It's going to drive me crazy.
Which at this point is inexcusable. It's inexcusable to be pronouncing Gonzaga wrong at this point. As a college basketball analyst, it's inexcusable to be pronouncing it wrong.
Honestly, I'm going to say if anybody on the Root Sports or whatever it is broadcast on Friday pronounces Bellarmine wrong, they also have an issue because like that's a high school in the state that's, it's small, but it should be known, especially in the basketball. Like Dan Dickau should know Bellarmine.
Yeah, they should know where Carson Hollyoak played high school basketball, okay?
Also, wait, while we're talking about broadcast, can we all just like take a second and recognize how god-awful Stadium is? We need to get away from that as fast as possible. That stream for the game on Monday was the absolute worst. I when I was going through and charting Chet's stuff on the court and off the court, I like feel like I watched a completely different game because there was about 20 plays that I didn't actually get to see because it was either frozen or spinning in a circle. It was terrible and the sound sounded awful. So
I watch most of the shitty games with no sound, to be fair. But the stream itself is pretty bad. I want to close out this episode. Also, we play Central Michigan on Monday. It's going to be all bench guys because we have UCLA on Tuesday. I want to close out the episode on this comment. Fran Fraschilla said, Drew Timme could be back next year. As much as this is a hot take, I also think if we're looking at it from, I'm going to give a shout out to Andy Patton's Goldilocks method of too hot, too cold, just right. It falls in that just right category of I could see it happening. Like it's not a for sure thing. That's not what I'm saying when I say just right. It's, yeah, I mean, he's not built for the NBA. Let's be honest. And there's a route where, and I think you made this comment, he is a National Player of the Year contender. Very good chance he wins National Player of the Year this year. This is his Luka Garza season. There's a chance he comes back next year. He's a National Player of the Year runner, contender again, obviously, to probably back-to-back runs, deep runs in the tournament. Ends up easily the GOAT Zag if he comes back for another season, and up there for one of the college basketball greats of all time.
Yeah, I mean, he's already, I think I don't know if it was the first to return or what the deal is, but like it was something with being nominated for, the Power Forward of the Year award, whatever it's called for the, the Hoop Hall Awards. Like to return, that's pretty rare. And then on top of that, National Player of the Year. He was a semifinalist or a finalist last year. He was an All-American. He'd come back next year. He would be, again, like maybe even more of a favorite to win National Player of the Year if you have the previous National Player of the Year coming back. And then I think it really comes down to the chances of him staying come down to how good we would potentially be next year. Because I don't think he comes back if it's like, we could be a top 20 team, outside chance at a Final Four. So it kind of depends what they're doing there. Obviously, if he stays, they're probably going to go even more, hard in the transfer market. But I think, honestly, you could be looking at I think there's a scenario out there in that's not too crazy where both Timme and Nembhard could come back.
Does Nembhard have another year? I didn't even realize
COVID
that.
year.
So do
he has another
guys
year of eligibility?
So that was my question. Did everybody get an extra year regardless of what year they were? Or was it that seniors or guys that could leave get an extra year or that were potentially leaving get an extra year?
I think it's everybody because if you look at Ben Gregg, he's a freshman. Last year didn't count for him. Last year didn't count for Dom, technically. Like that was what everybody was saying in the offseason. And if you look at different teams, I saw it with football this year. I forgot which game I was watching, but there was a guy who they listed as a freshman, but they were like, yeah, he's not actually a freshman because he played like 10 games last year. Like he's actually a sophomore, but that's how they listed him because eligibility wise, he has that extra year.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, Nemhard's choosing between Europe and Gonzaga, right? I mean, eventually.
I mean, I think he could find a spot on a roster if the stars aligned. Obviously, his shooting would need to improve from a consistency standpoint, but yeah, I mean, I think he'd probably do the whole summer league and see if he could find a spot, maybe make a preseason roster. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if he wants to be gone, he's gone. But like when he came in here, what was his plan? It was like he was going to sit 1 year, play what is now this year, and then go to the league, right? But
probably
I don't know that that's, I mean, everybody has those goals and plans, and we could be looking at like a Zach Norvell situation where it's like could go, maybe shouldn't go. I don't know. But if they win a national championship this year, and then Drew and Nemhard are both like, yeah, we're going to come back, then like you're looking at another potential national championship, and then you're really looking at, one of the greatest careers.
I will say, I saw your comment about Goat Zag. I think Timme comes back next year, as long as this season is a very good outcome. It doesn't have to end in Natty, but he comes back next year. He's going to cement himself as the GOAT Zag for a career, from a career perspective. I will say he will. I thought about this today. I was like, will he be one of the best college basketball players all the time? I'll say my historical knowledge of college basketball is not as great. Like going all the way back to the 50s, right? Is not as great. I did Google it. I looked up. I went through a couple of lists. There's no way in hell he touches some of the best college basketball players of all time. Timme, that is.
No, absolutely not.
I didn't realize just how dominant Kareem was in college. He averaged 26 and 15, 3-time NCAA championship, 3-time All-American, 2-time National Player of the Year. Bill Russell, 2-time champion, 1-time Outstanding Player of the Year, averaged 20 and 20. Pete Maravich averaged 44 points, 5 assists, and 6 rebounds a game in college. That's 1, 2, 3 from one list. Oscar Robinson.
Probably looking at like Bill Walton too, probably won 4, and you got Bill Walton, who's up there.
Yep, Walton. Timme could catch Leitner depending on how he finishes in the Natty category and National Player of the Year category. But yeah, Oscar Robinson, another one who went 33, 7, and 15, 2-time College Player of the Year, 2-time champion, 3-time NCAA scoring champion. Like Timme's not going to touch those guys, but he is going to go up there. I mean, he could pass Jordan for at least from a college career perspective. I think he'll make a name for himself if he decides to come back for another year. He's made a name for himself regardless, but
yeah, I mean, I think you'd be looking at maybe more from like a modern era of college basketball, just because you don't see it guys staying like that anymore. Obviously back then it's like, yeah, if you're at UCLA during that run, like you're winning 4 national championships, and if you're the stud, like you're going to dominate and be great there. In terms of, I think it was Oscar Robinson's numbers you were giving, and it was like best case scenario for him, if he came back again next year after this year and things were all to go right, yeah, he could potentially have 2 national championships, 2 National Player of the Years. He wouldn't have the scoring titles, but he would also have 2 or 3 All-American, first team All-American teams, 2 or 3 actually of the Karl Malone awards. Like he'd be up there.
I want to see him get a Karl Malone and is it Kareem that's the center one?
Yeah.
I want to see him get one of each. Like I know he won't, but it would be so awesome if he did.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. And NIL, I think, helps a chance to stay, which also he might have the best commercial in NIL history, the short history.
Don't make it, what do you say? Don't make it weird or don't make it creepy?
Like, don't make it creepy.
I'm trying not to.
Yeah, go check out the Northern Quest Drew Timme commercial. Give yourself a laugh. But yeah, so I mean, that's going to be something to watch as we go through the year and see where he's at on draft boards. And, if he's not breaking into the first round or, early second, does he consider it? I think I said in our group chat, I'd put it at 50-50 right now. I think it's totally realistic that he could come back. But also, going to the NBA or getting drafted is a pretty big deal. And that's a huge dream for a lot of these guys. And, doesn't work out a lot of times, but you can go play for a great team in Europe too and make a shit ton of money as well. So just depends on what he likes to do. He seems to love the college atmosphere quite a bit.
He is the perfect college basketball personality with the too short. I don't think we talked about that after I think his
both hands too.
Yeah, third basket of the game, he turns around and gives a little too short little thing. He puts his hand down close to the ground and goes too short. I love him. If he wasn't on Gonzaga, I'd probably love to hate him. But just a phenomenal person to have around and be able to watch play at the college level. Alrighty. Thank you for listening to another episode of Zag Talk. We will be back. We'll get this out later this week, and then we'll be back with another episode on Monday previewing UCLA and Duke Thanksgiving week. Go Zags.
Go Zags.